It's now 9 minutes before the hour of 7 o'clock on this Monday morning. Welcome back to the Now Morning Show. Now, as you know, every Monday morning we have the police service joining us, and this morning it's no different. Joining me, I have ASP Steve McKenzie, and we're going to be talking about the police patrol grid systems and maybe some other things we can probably try to slip in there. ASP McKenzie, good morning. How are you, sir?
I am fine, and good morning to you. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
I know I caught you off guard there. Yes. Well, let's go with the first thing first. The thing that you really came to discuss this morning, those police patrol grid systems. What are they? How do they work? Tell us.
So, the police patrol grid system is a new initiative designed by the Commissioner and his team to combat, of course, crime. It's a way of reinventing ourselves once again in terms of what we do. And if you think about the term police patrols, it's nothing new to any police department around the world. What we do or how we do it may be something a bit different from what we've been doing in the past. In this particular instance, we're using information. So the information will be gathered and collated and analyzed by our branch within the organization. It's called CAPA, Crime and Problem Analysis Unit. And they would more or less tell or dictate to us using temporal data and spatial data. So we use those statistics to determine exactly how our patrols should be utilized, the best time that our patrols should be utilized, and the direction or the areas in which those patrols should be utilized.
What are some of the things that you guys actually use to analyze that? Like you're saying temporal data, and I don't know what that means, so forgive me.
Temporal and spatial, simply time and space. Yeah.
So just now, you're using data from previous crime, where they would have happened, when they would have happened, to be able to determine where you patrol.
That's right. And as I said, this is nothing that was developed last night or yesterday as the case, and we have been doing this for some time. It's just that it's a new strategy, and it's going through the length and breadth of the entire police service. We have 9 divisions within the organization, and the head of a division has a responsibility for managing crime, separated and apart from the commissioner himself. The heads of divisions have responsibility for managing crime within their divisions. So before, you would have patrols in every division, because as you traverse Trinidad and Tobago, you will see numerous opportunities to recognize that we have police officers traversing the streets and the roadways and that kind of stuff. Now we're going to have those patrols more structured. We mentioned grid systems. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at geographics. We're going to look at, as I said, the data presented to us from CATA, and we're going to divide the country or your zone or your police district into grid systems. And based on the density of the population, your grid system may be smaller. And I'll give you an example. So in Port of Spain, a grid system in Port of Spain might be 2 blocks. So you may have an officer patrolling on foot within this particular grid system because of the statistics again, where we may have high incidence of crime there. And again, just outside of that grid system, you may have another grid system which may be about 4 or 5 blocks. And there may be a need for a mobile patrol in that particular grid system.
What determines the size of the grid system?
As I said, the statistics and generally the population size. So our patrols must be with a particular intent. The intent ultimately is to reduce crime and to reduce the opportunity for crime. So having that particular type of grid system, you have a police presence throughout. And the objective is really to have an omnipresence, at least the perception of an omnipresence, because it's virtually impossible to be everywhere all the time.
Yes.
So if indeed we have a call for service, it means that we must have vehicles on the ground. And not just vehicles on the ground, but vehicles free to respond to a report, because we may have a vehicle on the ground, but they're treating with another situation. So once we have patrols in those grid systems, and I use the example just now. So we have one in a very small grid, and we have one in a larger grid system. And of course, there will be other grids nearby. So if indeed a police vehicle is being utilized in a particular grid system, we have the operational command centers. We have a National Operating Command Center, which is the overall command center. And then we have each divisional operational command. So they would look at the patrols, because they'll have an idea exactly the location of each patrol, and they use simple technology like GPS as an example. Each patrol is required to call into the command center to give the duration of the patrols, the location of the patrols. And of course, the patrols is ultimately managed by that operational command center. So as I said before, if a patrol is responding to a particular situation, you can call a patrol at the closest proximity to respond to another. So once these things come together, you would see a greater response to, the calls for service. And that is exactly what we want.
Now, ASP, I'm assuming that this is a 24/7 hour patrol?
Yes, it is. 24/7.
And is it going to be working? So let's say, for example, is it that we have the E99, the traffic who normally do patrols and stuff? Is it working in tandem with them, or is it just one department that's going to be in charge of those patrols now?
It's a combination of everything. It's all hands on deck. I think recently the commissioner spoke about some 41 motorcyclists that will be on the roads in the near future. They would also form part of this whole initiative, and he spoke also about these cyclists being part of a community effort. So it's not just vehicles on the road and they're passing up and down. It's a case of being able to provide that level of service, that level of interaction with the members of the public as we would like.
Yeah. Now, I just want to find out, is it that when you guys are doing these patrols, right, when you're patrolling the grid system, do you approach each grid differently? So I know you're using the data, you're using the statistics. So if I go into one area where the crime rate is higher than another, both have grids, both have patrols, right? One just higher than the other. Would the police presence in one area be not just stronger, but would they go in armed, ready for whatever may come, as compared to the ones who might be walking around in Port of Spain, maybe less armed or anything? Is that part of the structure and the process as well?
Yes, it is. And it gives a bit of logic to the question. You wouldn't want to send 2 officers with just a sidearm in a very high hotspot area, or you need to have persons who are adequately tooled so that they can respond to situations. And of course, different types of police engagement. We have an aggressive type patrol and we have a passive type patrols. So we have patrols that are, as I said, foot. We have patrols that are mobile. We have patrols that are static. You'll find more static for things like hotspot areas or even like traffic, depending on the situation. And you would find those passive type patrols in your normal neighborhood communities, and you'll find those aggressive type patrols in the hotspot communities. So there would be a different level of policing as the need arises. The thing with aggressive type policing is they always give rise to conflict and always give rise to confrontation with police officers. And that is something
that
we're very mindful of.
That begs the question, is aggression the way that we want to go forward?
No, it's not necessarily aggression. It's, as I said, it's aggressive type patrol because you go with the mindset that this is a crime hotspot and you go for any eventuality. It's not a case as police officers we go to be aggressive towards the community or we go to challenge the community aggressively. That is not the intention. Our intention is to make the community safer. Our intention is to have that presence in the community because every community needs a certain level of police presence. So we can't abandon our responsibility to a particular community because it's a hotspot. Not because the salesman doesn't want to go to the area. It means that the police should also not want to go to the area.
Of course.
We will continue the fight and we'll take the fight
of course.
To the criminal elements within those communities. Yeah.
I mean, yes.
Broach it now, broach it.
I know, like recently we had a situation where we saw that aggressive type policing and it didn't go so well. It didn't go so well for one of your fellow officers. It didn't go so well for the community because the police came in there with an intention, and it turns out that intention, we don't know what the actual details are still to this day. We just know that somebody was accused. There were bullets fired, there were shots fired in this community. Unfortunately, a police officer lost his life. And then we had a whole situation where they didn't even take responsibility for the mistake that was made. How do we trust these aggressive type patrols? How are we able to trust that, all right, I know they're coming in with all these guns blazing and they're firing because I live in and where I live in, and them fellas up the road, there's big trouble all the time, so that's why the police come in. So, but how do I trust that me as an innocent bystander, as somebody who's an upholder of the law, somebody who is just trying to be part of the community, but they always have bad elements here, there, and everywhere. And we know they come in to deal with the bad elements as per se, but how do I ensure that I am not going to get crossed in the rush?
Yeah. It's a thin line as a police officer really engaging in that type of criminal element. It's a dangerous situation, and whereas John Public has days and months and weeks to deliberate on your actions that would have lasted for a second or two, At the same time, it doesn't really take away from the fact as police officers, because of your training, because of what is expected of you, that you do the right thing. And we can only ask that you trust the system. We have an investigative procedure. We have an appointment of a first division officer, which is a senior officer within the organization, who would ultimately be in charge of that particular investigation. And of course, generally, where the findings are, he would make recommendations through the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, which is another layer of independence that is just to show transparency in the process. And if the officer has been found wanting, as has happened so many times in the past, then he will be dealt with according to law. And if for some reason the officer is in a position where they would be exonerated, again, this part doesn't normally come out to the media, but officers are also exonerated. They're given a pat on the back, good job, and they go back to work. So it's a case of as police officers, being able to, in the midst of fighting crime with those criminal elements and those dangerous places, to do it wisely and don't take the chance. Now, it's a real difficult situation because, speaking it and experiencing it is always two different things, because when your hand is in the lion mouth, the question is, do I pull it out quickly or do I take the chance and time it? As a police officer, in this particular, well, I can't really speak about this in this. But as a police officer, let's say
in a situation similar to that,
those high crime areas on foot. Knowing that the criminal elements are armed, they could be around the corner, they could be approaching you with a vehicle, or even if you're in a vehicle and you're just driving by, you are in a very dangerous situation. And of course, our use of force policy means that we have to use as much force as is reasonable in the circumstance. And that's the catch.
That you brought that up, because, and I know we only have a few seconds, ASP, but I mean, the use of force policy, how does it work? Because we are saying that we have the use of force policy, but then sometimes we have seen where it seems as if police go to aggression quickly before even going into what the steps were. So just quickly tell us, what exactly is that use of force policy? How does it work?
Okay, let me just touch on that police going into situations quickly. Not because you see a clipping on social media means that's where it started.
That's where it started.
The end of
exactly.
It. So let's leave that right there.
It seems as if, it seems as if, because all we see at social media is the end. We don't see where it started. So that's why I'm asking, how does the use of force policy work?
So the use of force policy, in its most basic of definitions, is using as much force as is reasonable in the circumstance. So if the both of you are approaching me with firearms or cutlasses or something that could endanger my life, I can use as much force as is reasonable in, somebody who is logical, sober-minded thinking person, that is reasonable to subdue you or to stop you from harming me. If indeed the situation is different, I cannot use any force that is considered to be unreasonable. And the unreasonableness is something that has to be deliberated by, as I said before, what would a sober-minded person do in the same circumstance? And that's the yardstick that we use in terms of deliberating.
Now, ASP Mackenzie, this conversation could go on forever and ever. But I think we'll invite you to come back again next week. Maybe we can continue parts of it and get into some other things. But thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Before we close this morning, I just want to make one point, because we see, and it's totally off topic, but we see in society today a number of persons cutting these TSTT cables.
The copper, looking for copper.
Taking the WASA stop pipe. Now, in case you didn't know, those persons who are in breach of the law, that act can cost you as much as $25,000 if you're found, and we have instances of arresting many persons. So when you add the value of the copper, which is $2,000-3,000, as opposed to the fine that you would pay. And of course, the law even goes further to say that you can be required to pay to have, or pay the value of repairing the cable or whatever damage you would have done to the utility. It's not worth it. And as I said before, as police officers, we have a high amount of persons that we arrest and charge for these offenses. So it's just a bit of warning I'm putting out there to persons who are intent on breaking that aspect of the law. And as I said, it's totally off topic, but it's an important part to treat it as well.
Definitely, and thank you so much for bringing it up. ASP Steve McKenzie joining us from the TTPS. We take a quick break and we come back with more inside the Now Morning Show. Stay tuned.
But nowadays, so I am all